This is TWiT.
From the I told you so department comes the news, well, that we told you was going to happen. Phones are getting more memory, especially in China, where it's kind of like, we put 32 gigabytes of RAM in your phone because that sells better than putting 16 gigabytes of RAM or even 8 gigabytes of RAM. I exaggerate slightly, and I'm not talking about storage. I'm actually talking about the DRAM used by the chipsets. But the price rose another 5% this past quarter, writes Jeremy Hellstrom up on PC Per. He's talking about an Inquirer article. It's great news if you're Samsung or SK Hynix or Micron, who are making bank because they make DRAM. But literally, we have a world shortage of memory, mostly because of smartphones. And you could also say because everything now, ladies and gentlemen, requires memory. Your phone, your television, your car, probably your toothbrush if it's fancy enough. It's slightly ridiculous, but mostly utterly true.
I think what's one crazy of the stats that we brought up, one of the stats we brought up last night was that but what is the average amount of memory, like storage, you have in your phone versus memory you have in your computer? Are these related, right? Like, there's a crossover point occurring with this, and as you're saying, it's being used literally everywhere. And production's not ramping up. If you make memory, this is great news in terms of your sales prices and margins, at least.
Yeah, but if you're a consumer thinking about building a system, we normally tell you to wait to buy all of your hardware, as long as possible, because invariably prices seem to drop over time. But we're looking at possibly a 10 to 20% bump in DRAM prices in Q4 of this year. That's according to research from DRAM Exchange. So I worry.
It's one of those things that it's crept up very slowly, slow enough that it hasn't been a big red flag for anybody. But if you start to go back and look at places that map this over a year or 2 years, and you start to see that it's a significant difference for, say, if you want 16 gigs of system memory. Is it enough to dissuade DIY users from building systems? Probably not, but it is enough to start getting, say you've got some low cost mobile devices, notebooks coming out, and they can choose between 4 gigs of RAM or 8 gigs of RAM. As a consumer, you definitely want them to be able to put 8 gigs of RAM in there. However, if you're the buyer, the purchaser, 4 gigs of RAM is going to look a lot more attractive. So that's where the negative really comes into play, is in all these different spaces, right? And if using it for mobile devices as well. I mean, you're still talking about moderate, 4 gigs of memory and those types of things, but it's affecting all storage really across the board there. Anything like that, flash included.
So, build now or pay more later.
Usually the case.